Our next presenter is Hannah Duttweiler, whose mentor is Dr. Lisa Starr. Her study asks, do negative implicit appraisals of anxiety moderate the relationship between anxiety and depression? Go ahead, Hannah.
Thank you so much. So depression and anxiety are highly comorbid disorders, but not a lot is understood as to why. Now, a body of research has found that anxiety symptoms may tend to develop prior to depressive symptoms. And that is that anxiety symptoms tend to develop more during childhood, whereas depressive symptoms appear more during adolescence. And some researchers have posited that this temporal relationship may represent a causal relationship. Now, it's really important to understand comorbidity, as individuals with comorbid disorders tend to have poor treatment outcomes. So one possible mechanism for explaining the comorbidity is the negative anxiety response styles theory. NARS theory describes individuals as responding to anxiety symptoms with maladaptive behaviors and cognitions, and this tendency has been found to moderate the co-occurrence of symptoms. The main constructs of NARS theory is hopelessness and anxious rumination, and they act similarly to depressive rumination, such that they elicit pessimistic cognitions, negative memory bias, and maladaptive problem solving, among other things, and together may lead to the development of depressive symptoms. A subsequent study found that high levels of NARS prospectively predicted future depression in a 1-month follow-up. However, negative anxiety response styles have been assessed primarily with explicit measures, which require introspective awareness. And as some individuals may lack insight into their tendency to engage in NARS, the current study utilized dual process theory. Dual process theory posits that information is processed under two separate and distinct systems, explicit processing and implicit processing. Explicit processing utilizes effortful or deliberate cognitive control, whereas implicit occurs automatically without conscious awareness and includes concepts like perception and knowledge. As implicit processing is relied upon during periods of high cognitive load, it may influence coping and problem solving, leaving individuals at higher risk for psychopathology. Previous work has found that implicit judgments have been associated with depressive symptoms and social anxiety symptoms. To my knowledge, no current research exists which explores whether the pathway from anxiety to depression may be influenced by implicit judgments. So the current study worked to integrate NARS theory with dual process theory, such that implicit judgments may intensify the risk that anxious individuals will experience co-occurring depressive symptoms. And this is because the implicit judgments may functionally act as an implicit version of negative anxiety response styles, triggering avoidant behaviors like hopelessness and anxiety-based rumination. The current study also examined another possible negative outcome, which was decreased social support seeking behaviors. So social support is defined as information indicating to an individual that they are valued and connected to a community, and has been shown in multiple studies to reduce risk and severity of psychopathology. However, anxious individuals with negative judgments of their anxiety may have decreased support-seeking behaviors as a result of negative appraisal or self-stigma, and would not be receiving the benefits from social support. Previous work has found that negative explicit views on anxiety led to fewer seeking behaviors and other social withdrawal. So the current study tested to see if the same held true for negative implicit judgments. So the current study has multiple goals. First, we work to validate a novel version of the implicit associations task, which I'll talk about more a little bit later. Next, to examine negative implicit judgments as a possible moderator in the relationship between anxiety and depression, such that at higher levels of anxiety and negative implicit associations would be associated with higher levels of a co-occurring depression. We also sought to examine negative implicit judgments as a moderator between anxiety and social support seeking behaviors, such that high levels of anxiety and negative implicit associations would be associated with reduced inclination to seek social support. So this slide outlines the participant demographics. Again, this is from the same project as Emma Cho, who spoke right before me. As you can see, the sample was predominantly female. The average age was about 20, and it was also predominantly Asian, Pacific Islander, and white. This study included a baseline and a follow-up. In the baseline was a lab visit, which involved the IAT task and self-report measures. And the follow-up happened 1 month later, and it re-administered only the measures for depression and anxiety symptoms through an online survey. So this task utilized a novel version of the implicit associations task, which was previously developed in our lab using stimuli from other validated IATs. The associations tested was anxiety versus calm with negative versus positive. So this task is separated into practice and critical blocks. In the practice block, participants are familiarized with the task by sorting the stimuli which appear in the center of the screen into the category labels in the top corners. They would then continue on to the critical blocks, the first of which is a congruent block, in which the category labels are paired in the association that we hypothesized would be more automatic. So negative was with anxious and positive was with calm. Next, in the non-congruent block, the category labels or the category pairs are switched. So now have positive with anxious and negative with calm. This task is designed such that it measures reaction times to the presented words, and the reaction times for the automatic associations, like in the congruent block, are expected to be quicker than those that contradict them, like in the non-congruent block. The IAT scoring algorithm produces a final D score, which represents the negative judgment or the judgments, and for this task, more negative D scores implied more negative judgments of anxiety. Following suggestions from Greenwald, which included cut points for error rates and 2 fast responses, 3 participants were removed from analysis. Immediately after completing the task, participants completed semantic differentials in order to assess their explicit associations with anxiety, and these included feeling anxious is good and feeling calm is good. All other constructs in the study were assessed using self-report measures. As you can see, we assessed depression and anxiety symptoms, anxious rumination, and social support seeking behaviors. So looking at results, the D scores for the IAT did produce good variation with a normal distribution. 99.4% of participants endorsed negative associations with anxiety, as was expected. This table shows the correlation specific to validation. As you can see, the implicit measures did not correlate with the explicit measures of the associations or with the explicit measures of NARS. This table represents the bivariate correlations for all variables in the study. The D scores for the IAT did not correlate with any measures of the study, inconsistent with hypotheses. All depression and anxiety symptoms correlated in the expected positive direction, as well as with the depression and anxiety measures at the follow-up. And the CSI correlated only with the stress subscale of the DOS, such that higher levels of stress were associated with a decrease in social support-seeking behaviors. So looking at the cross-sectional results, the IAT did not significantly moderate the relationship between anxiety and depression or between anxiety and social support-seeking behaviors. However, explicit NARS was a marginally significant moderator in this relationship. And as you can see on the graph on the left, we have anxiety symptoms on the X and depressive symptoms on the Y. At high levels of NARS, which is the green line at the top there, anxiety was associated with depression. However, this relationship was not significant at low levels of NARS. Looking at the longitudinal results, the IAT again did not significantly moderate the relationship between anxiety and depression. But again, explicit NARS did significantly moderate this relationship. Again, the X is anxiety symptoms at baseline. The Y is now depressive symptoms at the follow-up. So this relationship existed such that at low levels of NARS, which is the blue line on the bottom there, anxiety was a marginally significant predictor of decreases in depression. This relationship was not significant at high levels of NARS. So in terms of validating the IAT, the scores did not correlate with explicit measures. And although implicit and explicit processing methods are different and unique under dual process theory, and correlations are not specifically required for validation, a validated IAT would be expected to have a significant correlation with the explicit measures. So this raises questions about its validity and whether it did measure what the implicit associations we were hoping it would. The task did measure an adequate level of variation in the population with a normal distribution, suggesting that the task may be a valid measure of explicit attitudes towards anxiety and not the implicit judgments we were hoping for. In terms of the hypothesis for negative implicit judgments moderating comorbidity, neither the cross-sectional nor longitudinal results provided support for this analysis. Again, since we were not able to confidently validate our IAT, it is possible we were not assessing the implicit attitudes relating to anxiety, which likely account for the non-significant findings. The hypothesis for social support was also not supported by the current study. However, the stress subscale was negative of the DOS was negatively correlated with social support seeking. And this could be explained by the possibility that utilizing social support may present itself as a stressor. And one possible mechanism that's been presented in the literature is that it may reduce one's own self-esteem to admit to needing help. However, the results of the current study are solely cross-sectional, and therefore no inference about directionality or cause can be made. So the current study also examined NARS as a moderator in the relationship between anxiety and depression. Explicit measures did appear to moderate the co-occurrence, implying that individuals who had a higher tendency to ruminate and make hopeless inferences about their anxiety experienced more depressive symptoms at the same time. And previous work has found similar results, that high NARS increases the association between anxiety and depression. Longitudinal results also represented a moderation effect of explicit NARS, indicating that individuals who had a lower tendency towards anxiety-based rumination were more likely to experience decreases in their depressive symptoms in 1 month. This implies that low levels of NARS may act as a protective factor for individuals from experiencing future depression. This is different from previous work that found an increase in depressive symptoms for participants with high levels of NARS, as we did not find that relationship to be significant in our sample. However, it is possible that because that previous study was done in a population of adolescents with a full 1 year follow-up, that the changes in the depressive symptoms for this population were not apparent enough at this developmental age to reduce an effect in the 1 month that we had. However, it is supported by previous findings that found for individuals with lower levels of NARS, anxiety did predict decreases in depressive symptoms in also a 1 month follow-up. So this study must be viewed in light of its limitations. First, the follow-up was only 1 month. This study was designed this way for various reasons, including limited time for data collection, as well as reducing participant attrition. And it is possible that, like I said before, 1 month was not a long enough window for the moderation analysis. And I would say future work should be done with a larger follow-up period. Also, this utilized a sample of college undergraduates, and it's possible that the levels of psychopathology were too low to detect an effect. And it would be interesting to re-examine these hypotheses in a clinically anxious population. So one important future direction is to conduct a study specific to validating the IAT. This would include a follow-up with a second measurement of the IAT for score stability and reliability. It is possible that the current IAT results were influenced by category labels or the stimuli used to represent them. And although the current study was developed using previously validated stimuli, future tests should be run to ensure that the stimuli are accurately targeting the constructs they were designed to represent. Also, it would be important to expand semantic differentials used to measure the explicit associations to include feeling anxious is bad and feeling calm is bad, to allow for a more full range of possible associations to be accurately measured. Also, future work should focus on implicit associations as they relate to anxiety and depression. Although this study doesn't provide evidence that support the effect of implicit association, it's possible that other factors, that with a lack of a validated IAT, we were not actually measuring them. Numerous previous studies have shown support for the importance of implicit judgments in psychopathology, so more work should be done to examine its potential effect on comorbidity. In conclusion, although this study failed to find evidence for the hypotheses, it did provide valuable new information for the NARS theory. Specifically, it continued to show support that the importance of anxiety response styles as a potential mechanism for understanding comorbidity. It also implied that, or showed support that low levels of NARS may have a protective effect. And it also provided a possible direction for a targeted treatment. Overall, this study highlights the need for continued research on implicit and explicit associations of anxiety and how they interact with depression and anxiety. I'd like to take a minute to thank everyone who made this project possible. And now I'd like to open up for any questions.